Hi, I'm retired NYPD Detective Vic Ferrari, and welcome to NYPD Through the Looking Glass podcast, where you'll get unique insight into the New York City Police Department. Before we get started, I encourage you to check out my Amazon author page, where you'll find my series of behind-the-scenes NYPD books. They're $10 paperback, $2.99 ebook download, including NYPD Law and Disorder. Before we get to this week's story, let's go to the New York Post and what's going on in the New York Post True Crime section. Damning new text messages were revealed Wednesday in the sex trafficking case against Sean P. Diddy Combs, as a Manhattan judge ruled the hip-hop mogul would remain behind bars pending trial. Manhattan federal judge Andrew Carter Jr. said Combs' proposal for home detention and electronic monitoring on a $50 million bail were insufficient, upholding a magistrate judge's Tuesday ruling to remand him. They must really want to keep this guy in. And listen, everyone is innocent until proven guilty. I get that. But I've seen murderers walk with no bail or well under $1 million in bail. So, you've got the one angle where maybe they're afraid he's going to start talking and he can give up a lot of names. That's quite possible. Maybe he's got the dirt on a lot of people and they figure if they can keep him in jail and work out a deal with his attorney, he's not going to start naming names. The other side of the coin is they must have video or sworn testimony from, real legit victims that is so bad that they're afraid he's got that kind of cash that he can flee the country. Really, somebody like that high profile, where's he going to go? It's not like the old days where you could just go off the grid, especially with that kind of money and everybody knows who he is. So, but whatever, he's in on $50 million bail. I got a funny, quick story about him. That's not the main story for tonight, but I don't know if you guys remember, probably it was in the mid 90s when he was dating J-Lo, and his car went out to the Whitestone Pound with that club incident, and there was a gun in the car. I think I told this story, and a couple of our auto crime detectives had a rack truck which had this boom, it's like a claw, and they were unloading stuff at the Whitestone Pound, doors and fenders and stuff, and the machine lost its mind and smashed the crap out of his car. But that was the least of his problems. Okay, next story. A man stopped by cops in the Bronx for drinking booze in public turned out to be wanted for murdering a homeless man. You think? Jarrell Scholes, 37 years old, was issued a summons for drinking alcohol from an open container Tuesday when cops ran his name for a warrant check and realized he was wanted in a slaying. Scholes is now charged with murder and manslaughter for allegedly attacking Ramon Cruz. This is what I've been saying for months and years. It's the little things that lead to big things. People look at it, well, you're grabbing this guy for jumping the turnstile, you're giving this guy a beer summons, run the guy's name for a warrant. If he doesn't have ID, run him through the system. And more often than not, a lot of these people, because if they're committing big crimes, they're going to drink beer in the street, they're going to piss in the street, they're going to jump the turnstile. So it's just common sense. This story is absolutely crazy and mind-boggling. A Queens doctor molested a male patient and made sick comments about his private parts months after he was arrested for fondling another male and was released without bail, cops said. Alleged pervy physician Amir, good luck saying this name, Sita Fawala, 72 years old enough to know better, asked a 21-year-old man to drop his pants during a visit to Modern MD in Woodhaven, Queens on Wednesday, August 14th, according to the criminal complaint. If I was a patient of this guy, the story read, doctor with broken jaw attempted to grope 58-year-old man. This guy has absolutely lost his mind. I'm guessing, don't get me wrong, I think he's a demented creep, but he's probably got dementia and he's doing what he wanted to do but kind of stopped himself from doing. I don't know. I'm not a doctor, but there's definitely more to the story. They should start interviewing his other patients to see if there's a pattern of this. So last week I kind of touched upon a little bit about the corruption scandal that's going on with the New York City Police Department and the New York City Mayor's office. And I did a little bit more digging and a little more research. I kind of was just shooting from the hip last week. This is actually pretty interesting. So there's multiple corruption scandals going on right now with Eric Adams' office, the New York City mayor. So I just want to kind of touch upon them and get you guys up to speed for those of you that are listening that aren't in the New York City area. If you're listening in New York, forgive me because I'm sure you're getting beaten over the head with this. So his first scandal is his 2021 mayoral campaign. So last November, federal agents burst into the Brooklyn home of Brianna Suggs, a 25-year-old fundraiser with close ties to Adams' inner circle, and Ingrid Lewis Martin, the so-called lioness of City Hall, who acts as Eric Adams' chief advisor and gatekeeper. Authorities have said to be investigating Suggs, a key campaign operative who claimed to have raised more than $18 million for the mayor for a possible kickback scheme involving the Turkish government and a Brooklyn-based construction company. Investigators are also looking into airline upgrades and a plan to fast-track the opening of the Turkish government's new diplomatic headquarters in Manhattan, prosecutors say. All right, so first of all, I'm looking at the photos of these people and reading these stories. Brianna Suggs looks like Golden State Warriors point guard Stephen Curry. Google her name and put their photos side by side. They just look a lot alike. They could be brother and sister. But talk about low-brow crimes. Airline tickets? I mean, what's next? Looking under the cushions at City Hall for spare change? This sounds like something that would happen in Camden, New Jersey, where the mayor gets locked up every 15 minutes. I mean, it was in the movie American Hustle, but there have been other mayors of Camden that have gone to jail for federal charge, or Detroit most recently. There's always something going on in Detroit or Camden. But for this to happen in New York City, so then the second scandal you got with Mayor Eric Adams' office is you got the police commissioner and his twin brother for allegedly bar owners to make their problems go away. Now, the NYPD Police Commissioner Edward Caban recently stepped down as a result of having his house raided by the FBI 2 weeks ago. And the story goes on to say that his twin brother, who's also involved in the scandal, his brother supposedly was the fixer, that if someone got a summons, he was supposed to make it go away. And talk about a close family. According to the story, they live across the street from each other in Rockland, New York. And it looks like the Caban brothers got kabonged. And I don't know if you guys remember the Hanna-Barbera cartoon. There was El Kabong. And he used to carry a guitar and smash people over the head with it. When I was a kid in PS 72, there was a teacher. Oh, God, what was her name? But she used to carry a big bag, and we used to call her El Kabong. And if that's not enough to make you laugh, then you have Mayor Eric Adams has 3 close aides, and they're all brothers. The Banks brothers, David, Phil, and Terrence Banks. Now, that sounds like the name of a band. And the 3 Banks brothers, School Chancellor David, Deputy Mayor for the Public Safety Office Phil, and private consultant, which God only knows what that means, Terrence, are also targets of federal prosecutors whose agents seized electronic devices during raids early this month. I mean, are you kidding me? But wait, there's more. Federal agents hit the home of another one of Adams' top aides recently, Winnie the Pooh Greco, back in February, and they searched for emails and records about trips the mayor made to China during his term as Brooklyn Borough president. So now I have to ask the question, why is a New York City mayoral candidate going to China? Maybe those, I don't know. I don't know this to be true, but maybe those trips had something to do with those Chinese cultural centers that seem to be popping up all over New York and supposedly linked to the Chinese government. And they're like little police stations, and they go out harassing people like Chinese dissidents that the FBI has been looking into. But, oh, boy, does this guy got problems. And I don't know, but I don't know if Eric Adams has accepted money from foreign countries. I don't. But you should always be weary of strangers offering gifts and money. Just ask yourself, what do they want in return? And then I'm looking at the photo of this Winnie the Pooh Greco, and she doesn't look Italian to me. But if that's not enough to whet your appetite, we got another scandal under Eric Adams' administration. Eric Ehrlich, the former head of the Department of Buildings, is now facing charges of trading political favors in return for more than $150,000 in bribes. All right, I'm not excusing anyone taking a bribe or soliciting or shaking someone down, but at least this guy is supposedly asking for real money. $150,000 in bribes to me sounds a hell of a lot better than airline upgrades. Ehrlich, 38 years old, the former councilman from Queens, also worked briefly as Adams' senior advisor. He's getting a lot of advice from a lot of bad people. He pleaded not guilty in September 2023 to 16 felonies stemming from a years-long scheme that prosecutors say netted him premium $10,000 Mets season tickets package, a suit, and a painting by the apprentice of Salvador Dali, amongst other things. All right, so I stand corrected on this guy, Eric Ehrlich. For free, for season Yankee tickets, I'll throw in an autographed copy of NYPD Law and Disorder and have my brother Fredo sign it. And if you act now, I'm going to throw in retired fire department chiefs Anthony Scavino and Brian Cardasso. Oh, they got the Italians in this scheme too. They were hit with a federal indictment on Monday that accused them of allegedly accepting $200,000 in bribe. All right, well, that's better money. The feds say the pair cooked up a secret partnership with a retired firefighter to fast-track the inspections of 30 building projects in the Big Apple in exchange for payoffs, according to a Manhattan federal court indictment. Now, again, all these allegations, you're innocent until proven guilty. These things haven't been proved in court. But when the FBI really, we used to say when the feds say it's time to go to jail, it's time to go to jail. They have a lot more leeway. They have a lot more resources to go after you. It looks like they're coming at Eric Adams from all angles, and it doesn't look good. And I get when you're in a position like the mayor of the city of New York, you can't do everything yourself. I totally understand that. And you tend to bring on people. It's like the NYPD when a new commanding officer takes over like a specialized unit. They bring in people that they trust. So the new commanding officer is a deputy inspector. He takes over the auto crime division. He's going to bring over a couple of his sergeants, a couple of his lieutenants, because he doesn't know who's who. He doesn't know anybody where he's going. He wants his own people. But if you bring the wrong people, things can turn bad for you when they're taking advantage of you, like what it seems like Eric Adams' entire administration. So there's a lot to unpack here, and I'm going to give you a little history about New York City Mayor Eric Adams. I'm going to try to be fair about this because, listen, the rank and file members of the New York City Police Department, the retired guys that know his act, they don't like him. And I'm not a fan either. I'm going to be honest about it, but I'm going to give you a little bit about his history, and I'm going to try to be fair. So Eric Adams, I don't know him. I've never met the man, but we were active. He probably came on a little bit before me, and I think he stayed a little longer. So we were active around the same time. And during that time, you would have to be deaf, dumb, and blind to not know who this guy was. So every NYPD ethnic group has their own organization. The Italians have the Colombians. The Irish have the Shields or the Emerald Society. Everybody's got the Polish cops have theirs, the Jewish cops have theirs. The black officers had the Guardians, and Eric Adams was like the Grand Poobah. What was he called? He was called he headed the Grand Council for the black fraternal organization, the Guardians, for years. And again, you'd have to be deaf, dumb, and blind not to know who he is. And the reason I say that is he was always in the newspaper, constantly, at least 10, 15 times a year. And he's always stirring the pot, and everything had a racial slant in it. So if there was an off-duty cop that got stopped and he claimed that his fellow brother officer stopped him because he was black, Eric Adams was all over it. If there was a shooting, Eric Adams was all over it. And the press loved him because he wouldn't shut up. And he had a couple of minions in the papers. There was one, Juan Gonzalez. He was another guy that always, everything had a racial slant in it. And he would run to him and other guys in the press. And he was always saying the NYPD had to do more and the NYPD was unjust to minority officers. So the NYPD, I mean, they were afraid of him. I mean, for lack of better words, listen, if everybody in the NYPD at some point or another feels wronged, there were times I felt wronged. I got stuck in a DUI unit, or I didn't get an assignment that I wanted. Fair or unfair, that's just life. You're going to get told sometimes you're not going to get what you want, and you deal with it. If you go around crying about it all the time, or especially running to the press. So my point is, if I started running to the press and was quoted in the press saying this about the NYPD, I would have been handled. Like, it would have been like the firm. Like, Wilford Brimley would be parked outside my house. Like, first they'd probably come to me at the command level, and my commanding officer would say, you better keep your mouth shut with this nonsense and cut the crap. And if I kept it up, I lived in the Bronx, I'd find myself working in Staten Island. Or, you're bringing unnecessary heat on yourself, and you're making the department look bad for no reason. So everybody was afraid of this guy. And Eric Adams always had political aspirations. I remember in the 90s, he ran for, I think it was congressman or state assembly. He ran for something in Brooklyn and lost. But he always had higher aspirations of being something more than what he was. And he's not a smart, in my opinion, he's just not a smart guy. And he always screamed to the press. He always got his way. And there's nothing worse than someone that thinks that they're smart and they're not, And you need not look further than one of his first press conferences where he thought he was going to go out there now and say whatever he wants to the press, and they were going to lap it up like they had been doing for years when he was running the Guardians. Now he's the mayor of New York. He's accountable for things. They start asking him questions, and all of a sudden, there's that one press conference where all he keeps talking about is a plant-based diet. And they're like, well, what about this and what about that? And he goes, I eat a plant-based diet, and I think everybody should. Well, that's great, but you're going to have to answer questions. So what's going on right now, it's kind of sad because he did it to himself. He's not a political animal. He's not. And he was shooting his mouth off for years, and he got away with it. So then he becomes mayor, and he declares New York City a sanctuary city, and that's all fine and dandy until all the migrants start coming to illegal aliens, and they start coming to New York, and now he's starting to worry, like, Jesus, who's going to pay for this? So he starts going to the White House and Washington and saying, you got to give us more funds, you got to do this, you got to do that, and they're like, just run New York. So he tried to shame Washington or the White House. He went up there a couple of times unannounced. He wanted to see the president, and all of a sudden now he's got these legal problems popping up. So this isn't the NYPD. It's not the city of New York. It's the federal government. And he's got problems. I mean, all these people, there's going to be people going to jail over this. I don't know how high up it is. I don't know if he knew about what was going on or it's just he picked the wrong people and it's coming to bite him in the ass. But these are just my opinions. I don't know any of this stuff to be true. It kind of reminds me when I was a kid in the late 70s, early 80s, Mayor Ed Koch, his administration, it just looked like it got turned upside down. You had Donald Manis. I forget what he was, but I know he got locked up and they were trying to flip him, and then he committed suicide. And there were several people in the Koch administration that went to jail. So it's just sad for the city of New York, for the decent people that are left there, that they got to put up with this nonsense. So what I was talking about earlier about accepting gifts and money and favors, and not asking any questions behind it. There's an NYPD cop I knew. I had a couple more years than him. He came to the precinct. This is decades ago. Nice guy. Just a nice guy. I didn't think he was particularly sharp, but I liked him. And we weren't pals, but we would go to the same bars and stuff. And good-looking guy. And didn't have to work for it when it came to meeting women. So, you're at the bar, you're buying girls drinks, you're trying to get their phone number. This guy just kind of stood there. The girls came to him, and they were sticking their phone numbers in his pocket. He's just a great-looking guy. He leaves the precinct. I don't see him for years. That's just the way the NYPD is. You go one way, the other guy goes the other way. You never see him again. And one day I walk into a precinct, and he's a sergeant. And the first thing I said to myself is, how the hell did this guy pass the sergeant's exam? But again, nice enough guy. And that was the last time I seen him, and that's got to be over 20 years ago. And the next thing I know, I see in the paper, this is a couple of years ago, he's a licensed private investigator, and he gets grabbed by the federal government, the FBI, and I guess the Southern District for working for the Chinese government. So what it is he's been convicted of this. He's a private investigator, and then what the Chinese do is a lot of people that leave China and they're bad-mouthing the country or they're accused of crimes over there, they don't let it go. So they have people here on the ground that will hire private investigators to harass them, to find out where they are so they can harass them. So basically, you'd be acting as an agent of the of the Chinese government. So where this retired NYPD cop got involved in, he located some people. I don't know to the extent of did he bother them, but he definitely surveilled them and found out their location. And the thing that came back to bite him in the ass was, according to what I'm reading in the newspapers and a Department of Justice news release, he accepted $5,000 in an envelope at a Panera Bread. So you can say, yeah, I'm a licensed private investigator. And this guy, I don't know who this guy is. He was Chinese. He asked me to find this person. Well, did he write you a check? No. Did he pay you? Well, here's the problem. Do you think he put that? I don't know this to be true, but I'm guessing. What happened to that $5,000? Did he just put it in the bank? Did he just kind of keep it off to the side and spend it and never record this transaction with this guy in the books? Well, ultimately, he was convicted on a lot of things. I really feel bad for the guy because I don't think he's the type of guy that would do that knowingly. I think he kind of got hoodwinked. But the last I saw was a year or two ago. He was convicted of it. I looked up to see if he was in the Bureau of Prisons. He is not, so maybe he's got it on appeal. Maybe he had the case overturned, and I hope that he did. But it just goes to show you sometimes people are willing to take that money and not ask what's behind it, and it can backfire on you. So got a little bit of time left. All right, guys, I'll give you an attempted murder case that turned into a murder case. So it's the early 90s, and I'm working in that DUI unit, which I despised. And we were working 6 at night till 2 in the morning. And that's, I mean, even for a young guy, that's hard, staying up till 2 o'clock in the morning, right? And it was the weekend. I remember it was like a Friday night. And up in the 4-9 precinct in the Bronx. And this car just comes like screeching up to us. This guy jumps out of the car and he goes, "Officer, somebody tried to kill me." And people are more dramatic when they approach the police because they really want to get your attention. So I get out of the car and I immediately recognize this kid from my neighborhood. We never hung around. He didn't even remember my name, but I remembered him. Wasn't a bad guy. And I says, "Well, what happened?" He goes, "This maniac just tried to shoot me." And he points at his windshield. And so like if you're sitting behind the wheel in a car, or a car registered in New York, right on your left-hand side, you got your New York State registration sticker and your inspection sticker. And right above it was a tight grouping of about 5 bullet holes. I was like, holy shit, well, whoever this is a hell of a shot. But he was lucky because it was a small caliber bullet and it didn't penetrate the windshield. So it was probably a 22 or 25. It was a 25. But anyway, I says, "Well, what happened?" He goes, "I'm a limo driver. These 3 girls hired my company. I picked them up. I took them out to Manhattan. They went clubbing. I hit it off with one of the girls. She told me, 'Why don't you drop off the limo and come back to my house and we'll go hang out. We'll go get breakfast.'" He goes, "Perfect." Guy drops off the limo, takes his personal car, drives to this girl's house, and he sees the girl arguing with a guy outside. So I said, "Well, did you get out of the car?" He goes, "No." He goes, "I just kind of parked there. I was taken back that she'd be in front of her house arguing with this guy at 3 o'clock in the morning." The guy sees him, runs over, pulls out a gun. He says, "I didn't have enough time to drive away." He goes, "If I would have drove away, he would have killed me because he would have got me through the window and the door." He goes, "I just ducked down and bam, 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 bam." He goes, when I heard him stop firing, he goes, "I just popped up, slammed it in drive and took off." I said, "All right, get in the car." So we race over to the house, look around just to make sure that, Jack Ruby isn't laying in wait for us. And we go up to the door and we start pounding on the door. And I used to hate that, like going to someone's house 3, 4 o'clock in the morning, and you're never delivering good news. It's usually someone lost their kid or someone was in a bad crash. But I knew this girl lived with her parents, and I knew if I just got her out of the house, she wouldn't be forthcoming because she was young. I think she was like 19, 20. So I really made a lot of noise. Parents come downstairs. They're in their bathrobe. "What's wrong?" I come in the door. I goes, "Your daughter home?" And the mother says, "Yeah, she just came home a little while ago. Could you please get her?" So the father, old-time Italian guy, goes, "Well, what's this about?" And he was upset. And I said, "Your daughter got a boyfriend?" And he goes, "What did that son of a bitch do now?" I says, "Well, let me tell you what happened." And I tell him what just happened outside his door like 20 minutes before, and he's pissed. Girl comes in, and it's drama. She starts crying in the pillow, and what's going on? And she gives up the kid's name, and she saw the whole thing. And while we're in the living room, the phone rings, and it's the boyfriend. So we turn the police radio down. And I'm like, "You got to convince him to come back." So she tells him, no, the cops aren't here. Just come back. We'll talk, blah, blah, blah. So I get on the radio. I call for backup. We take my police car, my R&P. We park it a couple of blocks away. A couple of guys I work with, we're all hiding in front yards and stuff. About a half hour later, now the sun, it's in the summer, so now it's going on 4 o'clock in the morning. You're starting to get twilight. The sun's starting to come up a little bit. I see a guy coming down the street, and once he got close to the house, like the whole street erupted. Cops were coming out everywhere. "Please don't move. Get on the ground." We cuff him up, and he's laughing. He goes, "I knew you guys were waiting for me." I said, "All right." So we cuff him up. I bring him to the 4-9. I'm processing the arrest. And I'm young. I mean, I probably was still on probation. I probably had less than 2 years on the job. So I knew I wanted the detectives to talk to him because I didn't want to screw this up. So while the detectives are talking to him, or I'm waiting for the detectives. The desk officer, the midnight sergeant or lieutenant, comes up to me and he goes, "What street did that happen on?" So I tell him, and he goes, "It's funny." He says, "Several days ago on that same block, there's an NYPD lieutenant from the Bronx. He just purchased this new Toyota, I think it was a Land Cruiser, and he lives a couple of doors down from where this happened. He came into the precinct. Someone shot into his car." He goes, "They pulled a .25 caliber bullet out of his door." And I said, "Really?" I said, "All right." So I call him our emergency service, and they show up, and they pull a .25 caliber bullet. Like, none of the bullets penetrated the windshield, but one of them went into the side door, and emergency service pulled it out. I think crime scene, it was like, again, a Friday night and a weekend, there's probably 6 homicides. And they didn't have evidence collection back then, so it was crime scene unit wasn't showing up for this. So I got emergency service, and they pulled a .25 caliber bullet out. So I sent, what I did was I did paperwork to have the .25 caliber bullet that I had ESU pull out of the door matched against the lieutenant's car that got fired into a couple of days earlier. So I go upstairs, and now this guy's being interviewed by the 4-9 squad. And I'll tell you what, for a guy that's being charged with attempted murder, it just didn't seem to faze him. A young guy, too. He's like 21. And he goes, "Yeah," he goes, "I'm having problems with her, and, I can't let it go." And I went out, she went out, and I went out, and I was drinking vodka, and I was waiting by her house. He was stalking her, and when I saw her with the guy, I just kind of lost it. Wouldn't give up where the gun was. Wouldn't admit to who he gave it to or where he tossed it. So I charged him with attempted murder, criminal possession of a weapon, all sorts of stuff. And about a week later, I go to grand jury, and I meet up with the victim, and the victim is a nervous wreck. And I'm like, "What's wrong?" And he goes, "You don't know what I've been going through." And I go, "What have you been going through?" He goes, "Since that night," he goes, "I've been getting threatening phone calls constantly." He goes, "Like, as soon as I put the phone back on the cradle, it starts ringing, and someone's telling me, if you cooperate with the cops, we're going to kill you." And he goes, so they were threatening him, and he lived with his parents, and someone also tossed a brick through his window. How they found out where he lived is beyond me, and it wasn't in the same neighborhood. So he's like, I'm not going to testify. You have to. So we talked him into it. He testified. We got the kid indicted. And the witness basically moved out of town for a while. The DA knew where he was, and he kept in touch with the district attorney's office, but he got the hell out of the neighborhood because he just didn't want any problems with this guy. So this went on. It was one of those things where, usually something like that takes a year to go to court. This took longer. And I remember, like, whenever I had a case, I would stop by the district attorney's office. She'd say, "He's got good attorneys." She says, they keep trying to put this off. She says, "But his time's going to come." I said, "Okay." So, now we're going on a year and a half, 2 years, and I'll never forget, it was a Monday. I stop in, and the DA is like, don't worry about that case. And I says, "What happened?" She goes, "Vacated by death." I go, "Vacated by death?" I go, "What does that mean?" And she says, he was coming out of a bar on East Chester Road in the same neighborhood, the precinct, and someone killed him. And I says, "Do they have anybody?" She goes, "No." She goes, the 4-9 squad doesn't have anything yet, and no one in the neighborhood is talking. So basically, the guy got himself killed. I don't know if it was a result of this, shooting into the guy's car, or he had a beef with someone else. I'm guessing by his blasé attitude that day, probably pissed somebody off. And it's a shame. He was a young guy too, and now he's dead. The limo driver was kind of relieved because then he didn't have to get tormented anymore. He had nothing to do with it. So that's actually a story from my new book. There's way more to it, but that's a story from my new book, NYPD Presumption and Dysfunction, and that'll be out before the holidays. As always, I want to thank everyone for tuning in, especially my listeners in Hamilton, Ontario, Kansas City, Missouri, Chicago, Illinois, Everett, Massachusetts, Alma, Wisconsin, Las Vegas, Nevada, and Waverly, Tennessee. If you're watching on YouTube, please hit the like and the subscribe button. I'm this close to getting 1,000 subscribers, and then I can make a little money with this. If you work in law enforcement or have an interesting criminal background, drop me a note on Twitter or Instagram at VicFerrari50. If you enjoy the content, check out my Amazon author page where you can find all my NYPD books. They're $10 paperback, $2.99 ebook download. And again, I appreciate, everyone that watches this, and it means a lot to me. But anyway, thanks again, everyone, and I'll see you guys next week. Take care.